This is a club layout that's been on the go for about 30 years, been rewired no end of times, and then I've been asked to sort the wiring out. So the first thing I looked at it was the wiring that was on, and I thought, now every single wire is getting taken off and I'm starting again. So this is the layout, just 3 pictures. It's in 3 boards. So that's the main station board, and that's the middle section board with a few sidings along the bottom, and then a hidden sidings at the back. So the first thing was to find out what the club members wanted, which, as you can imagine, was quite a list of things. First thing, how they wanted it run, DC or DCC. They wanted to run on both systems. And I thought, oh, that's going to be super duper. But then I spoke to Davey and found that there's a Merc board called the Totley 2. And with a bit of experiment, I found that using the 2 controller version of it, you can make it into a 1 controller, but have section switches. And then to help me set up everything, I decided to use AnyRail 6, which I already had from years back. So I used that. And then I discovered that you could draw lines on the program. And then I started using different layers on the thing. So I sort of started again. And this is the track layout, and you'll see that a bit later on. So the layers, I then discovered that if you put a number in front of the layer, the description, it lists them in the numbered order. So number 100 is board 1, but there's nothing on that board. 101 is the track layout for board 1. And then I added in 102 for the section point numbers. And then I jumped some numbers to 110, which is the PCBs on that board. And then 120 for the live of the track. 121 is the neutral of the track, and then the frog power, 122, and so on. And then I've repeated it right at the bottom. You'll see that there's board layer 200, which is just board 2, and then I've just followed the same numbers going from board 1, and board 3 was the same. So this is just with the track sections, the track and the section numbers listed, and the live. So I could print that off and put it into a folder so that you know later on you can fault find on it. The little ends, this is the along the top of 5, 4, 3, 2, and 6 and 7. They are the multi-pin connections off the board onto the control panel. And then I switched on the negative ones so you can see how it's built up a fair bit. And then the frog connections. Doing the dotted red and black line was a bit of a pain because it's actually 2 lines on top of each other to get the red and the black. And then I added in the PCBs onto a separate layer. So the red ones at the top are the Totley 2 boards, and the green ones is what I'm calling a servo assembly, which is the servo mount with some micro switches and the controller for the servo. That one is the wiring diagram for the control panel, and I've used different ends. I also then discovered that you could use ends. So here we've got a circle on the end, which means it's a connection, and an arrow on the end, which means it's a soldered connection to a switch, just to distinguish between the two. These black lines are double pole switches, so that one and that one are connected together physically. Right, on the Totty 2, the track bias needs to be switched off when it's on DCC mode. So I had the idea of having a 5-pin socket on the edge of the control panel that you either plugged in your DC unit or your DCC unit. So on the DCC unit, coming from the equipment is just 2 wires, the track power lines. On the DC unit is the track power connections, plus a little link wire to switch on the bias or not. You'll see just here the DC only plug connecting these 2 wires, which is the track bias for it. And that is the whole thing shrunk right down, but obviously you can hardly read that. I use spreadsheet of what all the pins do from the connections off each board. This is board 3 with the corresponding wire color. And then I've got on the bottom there all the different colors for reference. Now, what I did to get the control panel, I actually printed off. It took me quite a while to get it the right size, but I printed off all the track plans and the lines to all the switches. And I'm using that as my actual control panel markings. It's laminated. This is the first effort I did. And if you notice just here, this blue section doesn't have any power going to it for the track, because I missed that off. And then down here, there's no point connections either. So I had to take that off and start again. That's just a bit of a close-up there. And that's the underside of the control panel. I got somebody to laser cut this board, and what we decided at the time was that these platforms would be fixed to the side of the panel. But because I've got switches and lights underneath these panels, I'm finding them to be quite a nuisance, so I might have to cut them out. This is the actual program that I've been using. So if I make that bigger, so you can switch off what you like and switch on what you like to make things a lot clearer. Now I'll go to an area where I've got nothing in. So if I just copy that line for a minute, and then I paste it, I'll get another line the same. And I can just make it bigger. If I want, I can go into it and add a point. So now that the point's added, I can make it bend. And I can change the ends, I can change the color, line color, I can make it a red. So basically I drew one line and all the rest are copies off that first line. That was my idea. I don't know whether I'm doing it correctly, but that is what I've done up to now. The only problem I did have was drawing a white wire onto a white background. I couldn't even add a black line down the edge. So as you can see, it's got a lavender wire is white on layout, which has already tripped me up once. So I don't know, anybody think any ideas on that?
Keith, when you said you can take off the layers, do you mean there are different layers? Well, could you just do that to explain what you meant by it?
Yeah, right. Hang on, I'll go back to share screen a minute. So that's all the layers there. If I switch them all off for a minute, you get a blank screen. Now, if I track, I can switch on one layer, right?
Right, right.
And then I can switch on another layer, which gives me a little bit more information. Then I can switch on another layer, which gives us more information, and so on.
Right, right.
Okay, the black dotted line is a physical connection from the servo assembly to the point.
Right, right.
So you can switch them all on or off at will.
Yeah, or any combination.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
The only thing is, when you do a line, you have to put it on the right layer. But there is a function that if I put that one on the wrong line, here you've got the layer. So if you've got it drawn and it's on the wrong layer, you can change the layer that it's on. So if I change that to a live instead of a neutral, now if I switch off the neutral ones, that one still stays behind because it's on the wrong layer. It's on the live track feed, right? But you can, I'll switch that back again, otherwise I'll forget.
And when you did the numbering, did you made it with enough space, enough slots to put anything you thought you might want to add in later? Yes,
if I get, say, I want to put another wire into the track power, I can name it 323 and it will just go into that slot.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll show you how that works. So we've got layer there, and I'll just renumber it. That's right at the bottom on the left hand side. So if I make that 323, I need to switch them on and switch them back off. There we go. It's put it in the right place.
Ah, right. Okay.
So I've done it in tens for different sections, so I can add in new bits if needed.
Yeah.
So, but what I've done, this is a printout of the control panel wiring. It's 6 A4 sheets, which I'm actually using to wire the physical thing up. So it takes a bit of figuring out the print, because when you start a print, you could get 100 sheets on. But then you can click a box to say, don't print empty sheets. And you can also put on the background how I drew it all to make sure that it was square. I brought up a grid formation. But then you can untick the grid and it takes off all the grid lines. Otherwise, it'll print all those as well. It took a bit of an experimental to get it to print the size that I wanted it to print. But I thought myself that it made quite a decent front to the control panel. A little advertisement for any rail, it costs £47, but that is a one-off fee. When I bought it, it was about 35. But you get upgrades each time it's upgraded. But you can, if you want to play around with it first, you can download the program, and I think, or it used to be, that you're allowed 25 items on your sheet before you had to buy the license. So you can have a little mess about with it, doing whatever you like, with a maximum of 25 items. And then you've got to buy the license key.
Yeah.
AnyRail also has a forum that you can ask questions or look up previous answers to questions. What I have managed to get a hold of is these 25-pin sub-D sockets that are already mounted on a PCB board with terminals. And you probably can't see down there, but down this edge is the numbering for each terminal.
Perfect.
And I got those from AliExpress, and they cost me approximately £1.70 each. So that saved, because I can't seem to wire up these multi-pin sub-D sockets without getting solder everywhere. Yeah, I've got a 9-pin one here as well. This is me order from AliExpress. So the store name was Kexon Electronics, and that was the male or female, and that was the 9-pin, and then here was the female 9-pin and the other one. You get these screws, but the screws don't really work, and I had to buy some little nuts to go onto the, just here to go into the connector, and the only place I could find them was Farnell. I then bought some cables that were 2 meters long to connect the control panel to the board that are already made up. The only thing with that is I don't know how thick the cable is for each 25 cable. But if you've got any doubts, you can always double up a cable. They were quite cheap. They were from an English company and they were quite cheap. So it solved me connection problems both on the board and on the control panel and in between.